We're looking at the knees on the Sasha puppet. These, the knees on the left, the knees are controlled with 832 socket head cap screws. Instead of these joints having balls, they have cylinders. The cylinders allow the knees to move like the hinge on a door, so it controls that movement, so it's more like the way a human knee moves. The cylinders are 3/8 of an inch in diameter and 3/8 of an inch long. Okay, we're looking at a 3/16 of an inch bar. I put a little groove in it, putting in some flux, putting on the cylinder for the cylinder hinge joint. I have that cut so that the part on the top of the screen is the right length, and then I'm using the rest of that bar just to hold the material while I work it. I'm preheating the rod so that the heat comes from the inside out. If I just apply that heat directly where I want it, then the solder braze will go on the surface and not in between the cylinder and the pin. Apply a little bit. Once I have the solder applied, then I heat up the whole thing to encourage that solder to flow in between the pin and the hinge, the pin and the cylinder. Never glows like that in real life. That's just the camera making it look that way. Cooled it off in some water, if I can aim it correctly. That looks good. The challenge is we don't want any solder on any of the bearing surfaces. I'm cutting the excess material off on the cutoff wheel, being careful not to hurt the bearing surface. The bearing surface on this are the circles on the edges of that cylinder, plus a little lip around the corner. So don't want to hurt that. Do need to get rid of the excess material here, so just being careful, cooling it off in water, taking off a little bit at a time. If this is too rough on this edge here, then it will get stuck in the joint, so just carefully cleaning that off. At this point, it was probably good to go, but then I put it on the wire brush to clean off the rust, and I ended up damaging this part. So here's the part after the wire brush. I don't know if you can see it, there's a little lip of material kicked up over that edge because of how I held it on the wire brush. That tiny little lip, couple thousandths of an inch, is enough that makes it so that it no longer fits in the joint. You can see I'm struggling there trying to get the cylinder to move. I just took it aside, cleaned up that cylinder better, and now it can move. Just showing this here with the screw in there. See how that moves a lot better. So I learned you really have to be careful and don't harm those circles on that cylinder, that bearing surface. But it's behaving now. Should be a good knee. Okay, I just put the shin twist joint in the vise, putting in a little bit of flux paste. A couple little bits of solder in there. I like to do it that way. I have a little vent groove on that pin, and now we're just going to heat this up from the inside out. Eventually it will heat up, the solder will melt, it'll drop down in there, and I made this part perfectly wrong. It's first off, it's off by 90 degrees. It needs to be rotated 90 degrees. And secondly, it's not even 90 degrees because it's a little bit cockeyed even from that. So off camera I had to heat it back up again and rotate it correctly. See, it's off by a few degrees. It's more than a few degrees. It's like 93 degrees. Oh well, I fixed it. Okay, here is final assembly. The camera is brilliantly not aimed correctly to see there's the knee joint with its 832 socket head cap screw. Putting in a test ball and a plate here on the shin twist joint, getting that assembled. Later on I'll pop in the shin bone that looks like a barbell. Here's a good test. Get it laid in there, get it twisted. Make sure the socket heads are aimed towards the center line of the puppet so it's away from the camera. I think this is good to go.